Fog number 137 is Scott Sattler. Scott played his one Origin game in 2003, coming off the bench in Game 2. When selected to represent the state, Scott became the second oldest player behind the great Arthur Beetson to make his Origin debut. In all, Scott played 203 first-grade games, winning a premiership with the Penrith Panthers in 2003. Scott finished his career at the West Tigers, where he was a member of the team that won the 2004 World Sevens title, where he was named Player of the Tournament. Well, Scott, thanks for joining us. What does it mean to you to be a Fog?
It's trying to fulfil a childhood dream. As a kid being at the first game in 1980, I didn't understand the enormity of it all because I was only 7 years of age, but I just realised that being there, something special had happened. I didn't know what it was. But as I got older and understood how important it was, the day that I understood how important it was to wear a maroon jersey was I'd saved up enough pocket money to go and buy a Queensland Maroons jersey from the local sports store. And my dad made me take it back. He said, because you don't buy those, you earn them. And so from that day forward, going to Origins with my father and then learning the history of it and realising how much it meant to Queensland people, and then to finally get a jersey, and albeit I was 31 years of age, I still treasure that as a dream and a box that was able to be ticked off, not from a playing point of view, but from a childhood point of view. So to have a Fog number, whether I've played one game or whether you've played 30 games, is a number that it's like your phone number. You just never forget it.
You started career in 92. You played your match in 2003, which was a golden year for you. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Did you think your time had passed?
I didn't, because it's Queensland, and Queensland always had very few numbers to pick from. I thought my form through a number of those years was good enough to be selected, and I'd been involved in a lot of those pre-Origin camps through the pre-season, which were great to be part of and to be thought of. But then since I retired and I look back, I realised I was playing in an era when I was up against Tallis, Tony Carroll, Brad Thorne, just to name a few, who were great Queensland players who were playing for very successful clubs back then. So he's been one of my best mates for many, many years, and he travelled up in the car with me today, and you're going to interview him after me, is Clinton O'Brien. He was the one that rang me, and I was waiting for my son to come out of school, and he rang me and said, congratulations. I said, what for? He said, you've just been picked in Origin. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you've just been picked in Origin. I went, are you serious? He said, yeah. I remember going home and there was a message on your home phone answering machine from the QRL, from Desi Morris, to say, listen, can you give us a call? So, even though I've had one, I'm happy that I got that. I got a 137. My number is something that's just mine. So, a lot of people have a joke about people who play only one Origin game, and my reply is, well, Arthur only played one. So.
When Clinton told you that and you got the confirmation from Des Morris, what was the immediate reaction? Was there any nerves? Was there a sense of, oh my God, I now get the opportunity to play for Queensland? What was the first thought?
I went back to the kid who got told to take the Queensland jersey back to the sports store and get your money back. And I went straight back to that place again, where I wasn't 31, I was 12 or 13, and just thought about all these people that have played in the jersey before, and then the nerves hit when I realised, am I going to be good enough to play at this level? And sometimes I get embarrassed about talking about your Origin experience when you've only played one game. And people who have played a lot of games for Queensland say, no, it doesn't matter. You got to wear the jersey and you got to stand for a national anthem alongside some other Queensland guys and other guys that were kids that had that dream as well. So I went back to being that kid again for about a couple of hours, and then when the itinerary came through that I had to get on a plane the next morning to head to Brisbane, that's when the nerves hit, and I started, even though you're playing nearly 200 first grade games in the NRL, you're going into unknown territory. So it got a little bit scary there for a couple of days.
What was it like when you arrived?
Just like you walked into a big family. Choppy close, welcomed you. And I know I'd known Choppy since 1988 when he went and played for the Gold Coast Giants. And my dad was involved at the Gold Coast Giants in their first year. And so I got to know Choppy as a kid. And so I felt very comfortable with Choppy. And then Tosser walked in, and everyone knew who Tosser was. He's the godfather. So to talk to Tosser and how he welcomed you into what he called his family. And Matty Bowen was a debutant as well. Mick Crocker was a debutant. So all the guys from outside of Brisbane all met sort of on the night before, the first day. And Steve Walters was a team manager. And Ian Healy was the media manager. So straight away you're around all these people that you'd been watching on TV for so long. And they just made you feel like you'd been there for so many years. And I suppose that's what's been so different between the two states around Origin time.
You were selected on the interchange, and as a player who started most of the games, if not all of the games of your career, that was something you would have had to get used to. And that time sitting there thinking, A, when am I going to go on? And B, what else is going through your mind?
It was funny because Wayne was the coach. And again, I was going, you're going to get taught how to play rugby league on a completely different universe. It's Wayne Bennett. He's going to be one of the greatest coaches of all time. And it was so far, I suppose, in complete opposite of what it was, because everything was so simple with him from a game plan. Like, so much so, I remember day 3, I was sitting on the end of my bed and I was rooming with Petro. And I was sitting on the end of my bed and he must have seen this confused look on my face. I said, he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "When are we going to start breaking down the opposition and strengths and weaknesses and what our game plan is?" He goes, "Oh, no, we don't do that." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "No, Wayne doesn't have a game plan." I went, "What are you talking about?" He said, No, you just play at high intensity, be aggressive, don't make a mistake. And when Lockie wants the ball, give it to him." I went, "Is that it?" He goes, "Yeah." I went, "Oh, wow, how easy is that? You don't have to worry about it too much." So I didn't really know what role I was going to play. I was playing lock for Penrith and we were having a fantastic year that year. And so I naturally thought I was going to play lock. And then he said, "I'm going to play hooker." I went, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh," and I'd played a lot of hooker as a kid. I knew how to play hooker. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to play your hooker." And I said, "Okay, right, yeah." So all week I was at dummy half, both he, myself and Michael Crocker. And so I really didn't know what role I was going to play. And then Wayne Bennett was standing, we were at Langlands Park, and Wayne Bennett was standing about probably 12 or 13 metres away. And both Michael Crocker and I were just standing around. He said, "Fire a ball to me, Crocker." And Mick Crocker fired a ball and went straight over his head. He said, "Sattler, fire a ball at me from dummy half." And I threw it at him in the ankles. So we're both pretty nervous. We didn't know what role we were going to play, but we just knew eventually it would work itself out.
And the game itself, is that a blink of the eye moment, how quick the game was and it's all over?
Yeah, it was. I went on pretty early and stayed on for the rest of the game. I played a number of positions. I played hooker. I played a bit of lock. Was asked to go and defend in a different position throughout the game. So I played a number of roles in the game, and which I'm happy to do. You just got to do what you've got to do. I remember looking up at the clock and there was 15 seconds to go in the first half. I went, "Geez, that's gone quick." Half-time break went really quick as well. Before you knew it, you were walking back up the tunnel, and before you knew it, you're walking back up the tunnel again. So definitely up there with one of the quickest games of all time that you've ever played. Lungs are burning, legs are burning, and then have to back up sort of 3 days later for your club game. You realise how much it took you out of your system.
What about mentally?
Yeah, it's a wave of emotions because you get the news and you're up, and then you start to doubt yourself and you're down. Then you get into camp and you're up again, and you're up for that whole week because you're with the fans. You're seeing how important it is to Queenslanders, and you're going to all the shopping centres and the training sessions, and there's thousands of people there. So you're up all week, and you're also enjoying yourself as well in those old school Origin camps, and you're around players that you've played against. You don't really know them, and all of a sudden they seem like your best mates, and then all of a sudden you get on the bus to go to Origin, and all of a sudden there's a huge dip. That thought about, am I going to be good enough? And then you get in the dressing sheds and you get that jersey, and straight away you realise, I'm here. I've worked so hard to be here. I'm so excited to be here. So emotionally, it was just so draining. I remember after the game, like the after game function, and the only thing you thought about was, I just got to get to bed. Like, I just want to get to bed. And because it was just took so much out of you emotionally. It was just a really emotionally draining sort of 10 days.
Well, it was in the middle of arguably the greatest season of your career. Did that one Origin experience make you a better player?
I think it did. You know what it did? I was really conscientious about how I prepared, and I was quite OCD how I prepared for my games. And I was never a huge drinker when I played. I picked my times when I wanted to have alcohol. I always looked after myself from a diet point of view. You know, I always made sure my kit was right. But what it did do, it made me loosen up my preparation a little bit, Origin, because I got to see how Tallis and Lockyer and Andrew G, these sort of guys, it made me look how they prepared for games. And they were so strict on their preparation. But they weren't so, in the days sort of 4 and 5 days out from a game, they weren't so controlled about their surroundings. I saw them a little bit more or less free and easy. And so it learnt me to loosen up early on in the week and then worry about your preparation later in the week. So I learned a lot from that experience. And I learned a lot about simplifying your own game as well. And that was just the way Wayne coached. It was, and the way that Lockie tried to execute it, just watching him. And it was about simplifying your game and what you need to do. Don't try and overcomplicate your game. So my back half of the season, so I had a really good front half of the season to get picked for Origin. And then my back half of the season, I felt as though I was able to sort of go to another level individually in the way that I prepared for games and throughout the game, you know, picking moments when you needed to inject yourself and when you needed to play a real support role. So that one game was a real good learning experience for me. Even though I was 31, you still think you know everything about the game until you watch the guys that have been there for a long time and you realise there's so much more to learn.
Well, here's another fact for you. You're obviously aware of this, that when you were selected, you were the only Arthur was older than you when selected to play for Queensland. So you're number 2 behind Arthur in that stat.
Yeah, it's not bad. And
yeah.
You know, again, like when people say he only played one Origin, you say, well, Arthur only played one as well. But yeah, he left a pretty big mark in his one game.
That's true. But we'll talk about the back end of 2003 shortly, but I want to go back to the journey that got you to play that one Origin match. Born in Sydney, but moved here as a youngster to the Gold Coast at the age of 1. Grew up, I went to school in regional Queensland, which gave you a taste of what, the regions think about rugby league. How did you end up starting your NRL career on the Gold Coast?
I think I just had a couple of mates who were playing. And they always tried to get me to play, and everyone just expected me to play because I was the son of John Sattler. Actually, it was my dad who didn't let me play as a kid. He thought the game was too rough. Funny that, coming from a guy the way he used to play the game in the 60s and 70s. And I got to about 11 or 12, and I just wanted to play because my mates were playing. And quite frankly, I didn't like soccer. I didn't like playing soccer. And so my mates were playing, and I think he just relinquished. He just sort of said, okay, go and play with your mates. And he made sure I played at a club where they knew they were going to be good coaches as well. And so when I turned up at Runaway Bay, where I started playing sort of seriously as a kid, like week to week. And from that point on, I wasn't naturally gifted as a player. I sort of had to work pretty hard for everything. I wasn't. Yeah, and my dad said that to me when I was about sort of 16 or 17. In year 12, I was at a school called Coomera on the Gold Coast. We're only a tiny school, only 3 years old. We ended up having a really good rugby league team, and we went through and won everything. We won state title. We nearly got through to Sydney in the old Commonwealth Bank Cup. The last 4 teams, we missed out by a couple of points in a grand final in Queensland. But we were a very good rugby league team, and that's when I started getting a little bit of interest from clubs in Sydney when I was 17. I made the Queensland Schoolboys, and that's when my dad said to me, he said, you're not the most naturally gifted player, but you're going to have to work really hard for everything in the game, probably harder than most, and because of the name as well. So it wasn't until I was about sort of 16, probably 17, when I realised that, well, this could be something I could have a real go at.
A couple of years at the Gold Coast Seagulls, then down to Sydney. How did you end up at Sydney, where you played one game for the Roosters?
So the Gold Coast Seagulls, 92, 93. I was there 91, 92, 93. Very first number 6 in State of Origin. Alan Smith was my coach in under-21s, the sheriff at Gold Coast Seagulls, and had a great relationship still today. And then played my first grade debut and played first grade through 93. And we had a really good group of young players: Craig Weston, Steve Weston, Adrian Vowes, Kevin Campion, Jamie Goddard. We were all playing under-21s first grade together. And the Gold Coast Seagulls decided to sign the older players and didn't invest in the youth. And so the Sydney Roosters, Eastern Suburbs Roosters, come along and offered me a 4-year contract, which was a little bit unheard of back then. It was 3 years with an option, and my option. And so I signed it. And I was in Sydney, and I basically didn't like it. I didn't like Sydney, and I wasn't a huge fan of the club. And I played one game in first grade, broke my jaw the following week, and I was out for 12 weeks. And the late, great Darryl Vanderveld, and on this day has only passed away, 4 days ago, he rang me in Sydney and said, "I heard you're not happy." And I said, "No, I'm not really keen on this Sydney place." And he said, "We've got this new club starting called the Crushers. Do you want to be part of it?" I said, "Send me a contract and I'll do my best to try and get out of this one." And so I was able to sign with the Crushers and come back to southeast Queensland, which I love doing. So it feels a little bit strange talking about that now. Well, Darryl's only just passed away, so we've all got a Darryl Vanderveld story, and Darryl was the reason why I came back to Queensland, because I don't think I was emotionally mature enough to handle Sydney. I was 21, 22, but I still wasn't emotionally mature.
And it was a difficult time at the Crushers, as we all know. Wrong place, wrong time, and so many good young players. You mentioned those at the Seagulls, but the Crushers had so many good young players as well, who went on to play Origin and win premierships at other clubs.
Chris McKenna, Travis Norton,
Clinton O'Brien, Clinton Schavosky was there. So many you could rattle off, Mark Tukey, etc. And of course, Gilly led the side so well. A couple of years there, then you went back to the Gold Coast, where you had a few seasons. But how did you end up from the Gold Coast to Penrith?
So the Crushers' first year was outstanding. Great interest, a lot of support. Year 2, before we even kicked the ball off in anger, we got told we weren't going to get paid. We got no money. So basically it was just a free-for-all. Everyone just had to do what they had to do. And I said to myself, listen, this isn't going so great, this rugby league career. I've got to go back to where I know it started and start again. And that's why I went back to the Chargers and had 2 great years. And 97 we made the finals. 98 we didn't have a great year, but we had not a bad side, and I had a really good year myself in 98. We played against the Warriors on a Saturday and we beat them, and it was a TV game. We played Penrith the following week. It was a TV game, and I got man of the match both weeks. And on the Monday after that game, Royce Simmons rang my father and said, "Has Scott got a manager?" And which I didn't. And he said, "I'd like to bring him down to Penrith and just have a look at our training facility." So I flew down to Penrith the following week, and I looked around their training facility. And first of all, I said, "Who can live out here? It's so hot, and then it's so cold in winter, and it's so far from the city." But then I got out there and looked at their training facilities, and I just said, "This is where I want to be." So the choice was South Sydney, Manly, or Penrith. And I was never going to go to South because I wore jersey number 13 and my dad wore jersey number 13. I think that legacy needed to be left behind. And then my dad said, "Who's it out of?" I said, "A Manly or Penrith." He said, "If you play for Manly, I'll never watch you play another game of rugby league." So I made it pretty easy to go to Penrith. So, and I'm glad I made the decision because I lived out in that region there for 7 years and just absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it, and loved Royce Simmons, the coach.
So you started at the Seagulls with a side that struggled, fair to say. Went to the Roosters, didn't enjoy your time there. The Crushers had some good times, but also some really difficult times for you. Then back to the Chargers, who were, a struggling team again, to be fair. Then when you joined the Panthers, you're winning wooden spoons. I mean, was there a thought in your mind, what am I doing again? Why can't I be at a successful club? How did it turn around from all of that to that glorious year of 2003?
I can honestly say, Potsy, I never once in my career said, how come I'm always on a losing team? Because you're playing rugby league. I mean, you're living out your lifelong dreams and getting paid to do it as well. But playing it first and foremost, first grade every week and training hard. And so 99, we had a great year. We should have made the finals, just injuries. And 2000, I thought we should have won the comp. But the unlimited interchange was just all about the Broncos, just big as beautiful. Yeah, 2001 we get the wooden spoon, and then Royce Simmons was sacked from the club. They had to make changes. Didn't agree with it, but they had to. 2002, John Lane comes in again, an original Origin player from 1980, and was so simplistic that he stripped everything back. We got Preston Campbell to the club in 2003. His son Martin came to the club, and we still had the core group of players, but we had these young guys like Luke Lewis, Luke Rooney. We had Shane Rodney, Joel Clinton, Trent Waterhouse, Luke Swain, Steve Turner. All these kids are 18 to 20. They'd all won all through their junior rep comps, and all of a sudden they hit first grade together. And then there's us older guys who are sort of 28, 29, 30. Your Ryan Girdlers, myself, and these young kids just taught us how to win again. And we went on in 2003. I didn't think we would win the comp. After the last 2 years, we finished last and second last. I didn't think we could win the comp until about halfway through the year. We beat the Bulldogs at home, who were the competition favourites. And after that game, I sort of thought, yeah, we could do something pretty special here. So I never thought being in a losing team was going to be a curse. But 2003 was halfway through the year where I thought we could probably win the comp.
Looking back now, 20-odd years after that grand final, and you are in grand final folklore with that great tackle on Todd Byrne. Your father was in grand final folklore with the broken jaw. Now that you've had those couple of decades to reflect, does it mean more to you now that people still talk about that grand final moment like they talk about your father's? Does it mean more now than it did at the time?
I didn't think about it at the time, and it's probably only the last 5 years, I think. Probably the last 5 years where I've probably thought, hey, that's pretty cool that we get matched with something. And probably since his passing in March 2023 that I've been able to sort of reflect a little bit more on it and realise that everyone's remembered for one thing in their life. Whether it's rugby league, whether it's business, family, whatever, everyone's remembered for something. And I thought, based around the sport that I grew up in, basically been brought up in a dressing shed my whole life, and having a father and son that have won a grand final and be able to do something in grand final that people can remember, more so, whether it's the fans or your teammates, whatever it may be, it's pretty special to be able to share that. And there was a memorabilia company that did a frame on it, and at the time I thought, hey, that's great, that's awesome. But since he's passed, it means a lot more to me now that frame that we were able to share in a grand final moment. And there's a lot of people don't know this story, that this intertwining lives is that my dad was involved in a car crash in 1979, and he lay in the Brisbane Women's Hospital for months. So they never thought he was going to walk ever again. He'd broken his neck, took the top of his scalp off, and while he was laying in that bed where he faced the roof for 12 hours, faced the floor for 12 hours, they had the halo into his head. And I never knew this until probably was when Dad wrote his book, his biography. And he said, there's one guy, this electrician used to come up and talk to me most days, and he was the one that kept me sane every day. And I never knew it. But that electrician in 1979 was John Lang. He worked in the hospital and he used to go up and talk to Dad and talk about footy, and he used to update Dad on the footy scores and everything that was going on. And then, fast forward to 2003 and he's my coach. And I never knew that. That whole time. John had never told me. And so, those 2 grand final moments are special for a family point of view. And then John Lang plays a role in that, where he kept my father sane and not wanting to end his life the minute that he could get out of the hospital, to then, sitting alongside his son and winning a grand final together.
Wonderful story. Well, how would you like to be the owner of one of these? A Fogs Authentic Game Ball signed by Wally Lewis at the 2023 Wally Lewis medalist Reuben Cotter. Now, all you have to do is subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. And each week, gentlemen, we'll be giving away one of these footballs to one of the viewers of the Fogs Queenslander podcast. Well done.
Well, it's good to be able to hand them on to the general public who like it, as long as we don't get blamed for breaking one of Mum's windows when they're kicking it around the backyard or tossing it around.
But this will be framed in a nice
Reuben Cotter's name. Wow.
Do you know how to subscribe and like and do all that, Gilly? No?
Oh. We can help you, mate. We can help you.
Help me out, fellas.
The 2 daughters can help you out.
So we have one of these to give away each week until stocks run out, until Wally gets sick and tired of signing them and Reuben Cotter disappears. But just subscribe to our channel, Fogs Queenslander Podcast. Write a comment below and click that like button. Everyone goes into the draw, and we've got one of these to give away each week.
Now, do you have a favourite player that you played with?
Favourite player I played with, probably Jamie Goddard. So we played under 21s together. He was a skinny little bald kid that came down from Mount Isa. And we became really close mates, and I loved the way that he trained and played well above his weight. And the other guy I really, really loved playing with was, at Penrith, there were 3 people. There was Tony Puletua, who was just a freak of an athlete and a wonderful human. Ryan Girdler, amazing sense of the game. And our captain, Craig Gower. Craig Gower was a guy that, if I called him now at 3 a.m. in the morning and said, I can't tell you what I need you for, but I need you, he'd jump in his car and drive straight to your house and wouldn't ask questions. So they're the guys I really loved. When I think about my career, I really loved playing with. The one special memory I have got, Potts, is I got to play with the King in his last year in 1992. My first grade debut against Parramatta, the King was the captain that night, and we won that game against Parramatta. And to be able to say that you've played alongside the King for one game, it's pretty special.
What about playing alongside a player for one game that you never got the chance to play with?
Who would that be?
Yeah.
Who would I have loved to have been?
Played, yeah. With?
Play with. Joey Johns. Yeah. I used to study Joey and Matty Johns a lot when I played, just on videotape. And just so I knew that when I played against them, I'd like to try and understand what they were doing. Not a lot of times that it worked, but I was mesmerised with the way that Joey and Matty Johns used to educate themselves on the game. So, if there's one player I would have loved to play with, would have been Joey.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
Outside my father, who had a huge influence, without being involved heavily, just his looming shadow, I think, was enough to sort of make you want to train hard and be a really good teammate. The one that had the biggest influence on my career, my entire career, would be my high school coach, Alan Rainey, who at Coomera High, he was a very Wayne Bennett-like. He cared about the player before the on-field player, the person before the player. And also Grant Bell, who was our under-21s coach at the Gold Coast Seagulls and ended up being the Cowboys' first ever coach in 1995. Yeah, they had huge influences on my career.
And just finally, mate, now that the career's over and you're able to look back, how do you define your career? How do you look back on your career?
I look back on it with a lot of pride. To be able to play over 200 first grade games, to be able to get one Origin jersey, represents to me when I look back, that was a lot of hard work. And the words that my dad said to me as a 17-year-old, you're going to have to work harder than everyone else because of the name and because you're not as naturally talented, says that I achieved that I worked really hard to wherever I got to and tried to train harder than everyone else that I played with and against. And when I look back, I look back that it provided me with some great friends, really great friends, some amazing experiences, whether it's successful or not as successful. And also the game itself and my career taught me some great lessons that I ended up taking into life after rugby league, whether it be business or how you interact with people, the importance of staying connected with your former teammates and former coaches. Yeah, it teaches you a lot of humility. So when I look back on my career, I achieved way more than I ever thought that I would even possibly imagine.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Fogs Queenslander podcast. If there's a Fog you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.